Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Art of Slowing Down podcast. I am very delighted. I have an amazing guest here with me today. His name is Matt Gottesman, and welcome, Matt. I'm going to read your bio, but I want to quickly say hi.
I know. Thank you so much for having me on. I so appreciate it.
Yeah, I have to say, so I started to stalk him a little bit on Instagram because he really stood out with some very potent messages and posts. And so I reached out and I asked him to come on my podcast because I feel like my audience can so benefit from what you have to share. So thank you
Uh,
for saying yes or following your intuition, right? It's always like divine guidance when it's meant to be. So,
always.
all right, let me tell you a little bit about him. So, Matt is a two times founder, writer, and podcaster. He's also an agile digital marketer and strategist by trade with a background in helping some of the world's most iconic brands, which we probably all know, such as Louis Vuitton, Moet, Hennessy, and more. And he loves business, spirituality, and exploring personal development, like all you guys do as well, I think, and human optimization, because he believes all of these help us become better people, creating more intentional impact in the world. And he runs The Niche is You, which we're going to talk more about this, a weekly newsletter on Substack, which also became his personal and second podcast. So The Niche is You as a top 1% podcast, I think, as a way to help people break from the system to expand more on themselves through their collective work, art, and passions with the goal of bringing more ownership and sovereignty. It's, my German sometimes can't say these
No,
words.
it's okay.
Yeah, back to the individual. And in short, he felt that choosing a niche can feel like life or death until you realize the niche is you. And you are the most powerful and creative operating system. So your purpose actually has direction. And Matt is currently working on his first published book that's going to come out sometime in 2024, as well as the launch of an amazing apparel line that I have all these questions about. So, how does it sound to hear your bio?
It's so interesting when you hear your background versus when you talk about other people's.
Yeah.
So and then you think about how does it all get done, and then you think about the journey of all of that, and you're like, yeah, wow, like that, like one thing led to another, and I was just thinking about, wow, it's a lot, but like I'm so grateful because it was like it's actually longer than those paragraphs, right? It's like 10 years in the making, and even
Yeah.
before it's another 10 before that. So, and I only share that because I want people to feel like, okay, so there's time. I'm like, yeah, there's always time, and we're always evolving in the process. And I'm even doing things now that I was like, I had inklings of knowing that I might do, and then other things I'm like, I never would have thought it was going to go in that direction. And
Mhm.
that's part of following, the calling, following the things that come up along the way. So it's interesting to hear it, for sure.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I also because we forget how amazing we are. I think all of us, right? And then we
Yeah,
hear our bio and like, oh, this is me. Really interesting. So
right.
I would love to hear more about. So this really caught my attention so much, the niche is you, because I can tell you when I first became a coach, like over 6 years ago, I signed up for gazillion of programs, spent so much money trying to get the niche, and it was a headache. Like you said, it's a life or death situation in some way. Caught, I mean, brought up so much frustration and everything. And for me, it was human design and Jinky's on these tools that helped me realize that really I am unique and I want to stand out. And the more I can be myself, I also then realized, yeah, my ideal customer is like a younger version of me, right? And the
Yeah.
more I am going to be me, I'm going to attract that. So it really, really spoke to me. So I would love to hear what has your journey been with that? Because this is your tagline, this is the name of your podcast, your newsletter, and all of it. So tell us a little bit more about the whole niching thing.
I love that you shared all your personal experiences about this because that happens, right? We try to learn, we get into programs, other programs online. I had done quite a bit of coaching. I still do a little bit of coaching, some private coaching. And I don't want to give a one answer fits all because I can't. Now, we can have frameworks and we can have, specific formulas that help align our individuality, great. But I don't want people to say, I don't want people to like learn and say, okay, I'm going to do like this like everybody else, because that's not really what we're here to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Niches You was born out of this. It was random, like a lot of things, I think, in a way. It was always there, but the newsletter at one point was called, when I first started, it was called permissionless, as in this idea of like you don't really need permission to produce your work, to like experiment, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't need a gatekeeper to say, oh, when you get to a certain level, then we'll look at your work,
Mm-hmm.
or when you get here, then you will feel like you're talented enough. And you see a lot of that happen. I mean, I'd seen that in the business world. I'd seen that in the school, like the educational world. I went like all the way with my MBA. I was still the black sheep of the class, like in a healthy way, but I was like always pushing the boundaries from an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurial standpoint, and topics. And this idea of like I would be taught all this stuff about corporate America, and I'm like, this doesn't sound right. Now all my degrees were in international business, and so,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm like learning about corporations, and I'm like, that doesn't it's not sitting well with me, and I started to kind of see how like the system was set up to be like, well, if you have a certain title and you have a certain status,
Mm-hmm.
you have a certain school, and you have a certain, job title and role and all these things. But as I was consulting, I was an independent consultant with a lot of these brands outside of Louis Vuitton, Moet, Hennessy, which was a phenomenal like house of brands to work with. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
these other brands, I found a lot of people in roles that should not have been there, and in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
and also got there by ways of anything other than being themselves. If I may be
Yeah,
blunt
yeah, I see
be
what you
blunt
mean.
about it, you know what I mean? Like made a phone call, so
Mm-hmm.
and so, you went to this school, you had this title, all this stuff. And so I'd always I was raised by two parents who were very like independent, critical thinking. They were just like, listen, one was a very holistic mother, like, trust your intuition. One was a very integrity driven, ethical, entrepreneurial father who was
Wow.
like, you got to figure it out for you, because if I tell, like, he was like, I don't want you to go into the same route as me, because I want you to do what you need to do for you. You need to figure that out. And so, you're pairing these two parents together. I feel very fortunate for that.
Gonna
And
say, yeah.
so I questioned authority. I questioned a lot of things, authority, quote unquote, like all
Mm-hmm.
growing up my whole life. So when I made Permissionless, this newsletter, 3, 4 years back, I was reading an article from somewhere where somebody was talking about niching and how that's very hard, and how like ultimately we're the niche, and so I created a Substack article called "The Niche Is You," and it was it was at the time became my most popular article. I'm like, there's something here in this tagline, because everybody is struggling to kind of put themselves into a category. And believe me, I totally get it, because to a degree, people want to know, how can you help them, or how
Yeah.
can you serve a particular need of theirs. Totally understandable. The business person in me gets that.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, why they decide to work with you or buy from you or support you or follow you or anything is the personality,
Yeah.
the authentic version of you, is like who you are. They're buying you. I mean, the funny thing is, you hear the same marketing gurus say like people don't buy products, they buy people. It's like they buy who they are. It's like, yeah, okay. So then you've got to be the niche of you.
Yeah.
And so I tell people basically, when it comes to the niche of you, go wide. All your interests, your character, who you are in this world, develop that so the world can, have a relationship with you. And then when it comes to specialties with the things you want to focus on, then you can go deep. Then you can niche deep in certain areas.
Yeah.
And I think that combination, especially in our creativity or our entrepreneurship, I think that really helps. It's sort of like saying, like, these are my interests, but within these things, this is all I really want to specialize and do, because that's what lights me up.
Mm-hmm.
And learning a lot about human design makes perfect sense now, because learning about being a projector, I was like, oh wow, like that, because our word is success, but it's to help redefine what that word is to the individual,
Yeah.
and to say like, look, you don't need to do all the things that you were told you need to do, but you do need to do a few things really well. And what are those few things? The things that light you up, that are your gifts, that are part of your responsibility to really, rein in and master and trust and grow. And yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's your life,
Yeah.
and it gets to be the things that you want, not the things that you were told that you should want. So that was the development. And then that turned into, it was, so I changed the name of the newsletter just about a year or so ago, after I had like launched the podcast.
Mm.
And it was my second podcast, and a lot of my audience had asked for kind of more small, morning, like 15-minute, like, hey, give me some of your thoughts. And I was always doing the voice text to the community when people would ask questions. So I'm like, all right, you know what, let's just do a podcast. And that then grew. Uh and I I had to call it. I'd always been in around design and apparel in some way. And then that led into the apparel. We don't have to go into that just yet, but like it was and it's still early. There's still a lot I want to do, because we have to kind of pace ourselves,
Yeah.
the activities. But yeah, I wanted, no matter what medium I use, because I'm a writer, no matter what medium I use, I want to remind people like, hey, this is about you. And and driving your lane. And I can't tell, like my father, I can't tell you how the lane should look, but it is your responsibility to really cultivate that lane and to do good work, responsible work, accountable work. Yeah, I know that the world is an interesting place. I'm gonna use the word interesting. It's all a little all over the place, but that's because it's one that's shifting. And so the responsible thing to do is each of us have to step up and kind of start reining in our gifts and start, building from
Yeah.
that place, right? So here we
Mm.
are.
Oh gosh, there's so many things I want to touch upon, but what you just said, because I have been saying this myself a lot too, that it's a responsibility we have, right?
Mhm.
That we do the thing that we are supposed, that we came in this world here to share with, because we are here to give to humanity, right? We have to receive our gifts, right? Receive nourishment, guidance, and all of that, and then give and share freely. Then we are, I guess, in the flow of the universe. And I really feel, I mean, we are fortunate in a way that somehow this has been ingrained within our DNA, and obviously with your parents, what a gift, like you say. And you probably feel like this too. I think we all like felt like the black sheep growing up. I also have used that label on myself many times. But then also my sister was, I have three sisters, and one of my sisters, I was like, I think we probably all feel like a little bit like the black sheep sometimes. But sometimes I feel like we are already living in the future a little bit. Like we see where this is going, and we are leading humanity to this, because I think we live in a time right now where life is really kicking our butt if we conform to what society tells us, what we think we have to do. That's why we have, like, I don't know, 80% plus burnout rates, and, people getting sick and tired. We had COVID, right? Which also was a great thing in a sense of, like, not saying it was great, but that it made us
It revealed a
pause
lot. Yeah.
and made us go inside, which is so uncomfortable, do a lot of the inner healing work, right? And I feel so excited about all of this, that we are now in a time where this cookie cutter is not going any further. And with the niching, what really became clear to me, so also from what you're talking and my own journey, I think most people approach it in the beginning. Yeah, it's true. Like we always say, you have to be specific, and just like when you go to a specialist, you want to make sure it's not just a jack of all trades. But how did they get there? And when I tried to do this 6 years ago, I wasn't purely authentic. I just wasn't. I was insecure. I was trying to be successful overnight. And what I had to realize, that I had to experiment, that I had to try things out. And some worked, some didn't work. And I had to show up, and you post a lot about it, right? You're never going to be ready. You start creating, start promoting, start creating content. even if you think it's bad. And you also use examples from artists, how they have put thousands of paintings out there and only like a small percentage actually were successful at the end of the day. And just now, over the last few years, I'm becoming naturally more specific. And I also
Right.
have lots of people that have told me now, like, well, I buy whatever you put out there. It's about you. So it made me also realize what you said. Yeah, people want you, and then it doesn't really matter because you stand for something, right? Which is
Mhm.
probably very specific. And I think the thing with a niche is like when we try to figure it out from the mind, forget it.
Forget it.
When it's meant to be, when you be meant to become the specialist, it's just a natural evolution that
Mhm.
comes out of you showing up consistently and pouring your creativity out into the world, no matter how ready you feel, right?
It's so that was so well put. It's a natural evolution into like your specialty, you know. And what's interesting is we have to move, we have to create to receive. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you stay stagnant, if you just sit on the sideline and you just keep using your mind, like you don't have any input, you don't have any energy, you don't have any data,
Mm.
no signals, no nothing. And a big thing that I found was when you move, an answer is delivered. And when that answer is delivered, it tells you something, anything, what to do next, one way or
Yeah.
another. And the more, that's why I like when I tell people like keep producing, keep publishing, keep moving, because what's happening is you're kind of keeping this infinite flow of energy, so you can like um, allow more to come through
Mm-hmm.
you.
Mm-hmm.
And then as
Mm-hmm.
more is coming through you, you're able to see a clearer direction to go that
Yeah.
also involves specializing as well too, because you're like, this feels so good right here. Like, yeah, how else did you find that? You were moving. You were
Yeah.
actually in the game, and you're and you're finding this version of you that makes you very unique and individual, right? And so, but you have to move to do that. And if we get too much in the head, we get lost before we even begin. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like this constant uh harmony of I'm going to make a move, but I have to feel at the same time. I have to understand. I have to,
Mm-hmm.
collect information at the same time. So I'm always checking in. I'm always, evolving, right?
Mm.
So it's a surrendering process in a lot of ways. It's like, well, I
Yeah.
don't know what people say all the time. It's like, well, I don't know what to do. I'm like, none of us do. Like I keep telling everybody, I'm like, none of us know. They're like,
Yeah.
well, how did you figure it out? I'm like, by figuring it out. And it's
Yeah.
I like the contrarian statements to people because it is that simple, but we're not wired for the simplicity because society was really making a lot of things complex. At least it
Mm-hmm.
has over this last, 100 plus years, and to that cookie cutter system that you were talking about, it was very much ingrained. Like these are the right routes, these are the right professions, these are the right things, and
Mm-hmm.
somewhere a lot of people stopped questioning things. And then here I'm raised to like question everything. So that's immediately going to make a black sheep situation where I'm like, is it me? I mean, I spent a lot of years like, is it me? Like, am I like, is it me? You know? And that's why also I think that as the niche as you is like that concept of, no, it's not. But yes, it also is like it's a good thing. You want to be different and you want to figure out how the differences lead you to your life specialties. And by the way,
Yeah.
when you brought up the jack of all trades, I was years ago that I saw the Fuller quote from Shakespeare. I didn't know it was a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. And I remember there was a reel
I
that went
didn't know
viral.
that quote.
I didn't
Yeah.
either. I didn't either. There was a reel online that went viral. This woman was saying, hey, have you ever heard of the jack of all trades quote? And the guy's like, yeah. And he goes, she's like, do you know the Fuller quote? And he's like,
Mm.
no. She said, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. And so it was this idea
Wow.
of, yeah, it changes the perspective. See, it's
Ah, it feels so good because I always like was like, I know I'm so good at everything. And
yeah, and we're meant to be. We're meant to
mm.
be. I'm not saying we're meant to be good at everything, but we're
Mm.
meant to be multifaceted
Yeah.
and learn what that means for the personal mission.
Yeah, yeah.
And then that's another tough one. People say like, well, what is my purpose and how do I find it? I'm like, well, you got to be kind of out there.
But it's like I find that your purpose finds you
Exactly. You have to be out
as
there to find it.
you get to play, you go wild in
Yeah.
all these directions. And it's also in the Jinkies. I don't know if you have heard about it. The Jinkies is something that has grown out of human design. It's these 64 archetypal energies. And there's one Jinky, this Jinky 16, which is all about versatility, which is this like we all have this multi-passionate energy in some way, not just the manifesting generator in human design. That's kind of the archetype that lives it the most, but it's in the end, you have to bring it all to the table. It's like cooking if you put everything in the pot.
Yeah.
And then your magic soup, that's you, the niche is you, that, but it's from all these different unique ingredients in that, right? I
Hmm.
think we have it all backwards, to be honest. Everything is like we need to figure it out with the mind, and then we force ourselves into something, but we're not trusting ourselves. We're not following our bliss and all this. And one question I actually have for you, because that's something I always resisted, but I feel like in a good way, to be honest, this market research, yeah, where it's always like, okay, well, you have to create a product or a service that people want. So interview all these people, ask them what they want. For me, it was always like, okay, but then I'm people pleasing at the end of the day because I make it all about the other people and I'm trying to mold myself into that so that I do this to make money. It has never ever worked for me. And now I have realized that market research, what you were saying, is more like, okay, when I just produce, when I create content on my podcast, my divine inspiration for whatever I want to put out there, people respond. They're like, oh my God, I love it. Can you talk about this? That's market research to me because I create a conversation with people. They respond to that. They ask, and I respond back depending on what feels right in my gut and my body.
100%. That's exactly it. When you produce, again, back to the receiving, you will receive signals from the market. You will receive
Mm-hmm.
ideas. And I was just having this conversation with my trainer this morning, my weight training coach, and yeah, we were just talking about that and how Henry Ford had said if he had asked his customers what they wanted, they would have said more horses. And he's just like,
Mm-mm.
he was working on the automobile, so he's like, no, he's like,
Yeah.
he didn't want to just make cater to just to them. He's like, but he wanted to stay within his discipline. So what he
Mm-hmm.
heard was, if I'm hearing you correctly, you want more speed. And so he took a signal and he thought about speed for the thing he wanted to make because he was
Mm-hmm.
solving
Mm-hmm.
something they wanted, not delivering it the way they thought that it should be delivered. And then you kind of lose your
Mm-hmm.
authenticity in the process. But you're absolutely right. Like you learn it. I mean, there were things that as I was doing stuff, people were asking like, how'd you get so clear? Or, how did you learn to create this stuff? What tools are you using? What do how did you learn to write? Like all these
Mm-hmm.
things were coming up. So it gave me the inkling of like, okay, if I'm hearing you guys correctly, you want to know some of the frameworks and tools that I used for just being clear and directional and disciplined, or for setting
Mm-hmm.
goals, or for my creativity, or for like designing and developing online to like, so it became this kind of, and I had to you need time for certain parts to develop, like because to your exact point, you're constantly learning from the market. You're helping certain areas of them, and then they're like, okay, so now what about this? And then there's like the emotional side, right? So on one hand, it's interesting because there's the like when you talk about physical product, apparel, books, journals, like whatever, and then you talk about like digital products, which are more like educational, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got these two different markets. On one hand, it's like solving a specific problem or fulfilling an emotional desire, and they can kind of be the product, the fulfilling emotional desire and fulfilling a specific need, Like they kind of cross promote each other in a lot of ways, but it's just it's very interesting to see how human psychology works, you know, and you have to be very careful. You have to do you because
Yeah.
because like if you listen too much, it's funny. Like a lot of people are like, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And you're like, cool. Like if enough people bring it up, maybe that's, you know, some messaging coming in for me.
Mm.
But you also find if you cater so much to the people all the time and you make stuff and then it's like crickets and then you make something like, didn't you guys want any of this? Like I thought that's what you were all asking for. And it's like, and so you have to really stay close to like what you want to make, but learn how it's delivering a specific different types of value for the people that are getting value from you already. It's a
Yeah.
very interesting harmony, right?
Yeah, it is. And I'm just so amazed that almost everything that has been taught to me in the beginning, and especially like these fancy business programs for coaches and everything literally for me was the exact opposite. It was all backwards. And I got to a point of really frustration. But then I also was like, you know what? This is great because sometimes we need to learn what doesn't work
Yeah.
to be more confident and like, hey, I've done it. That's really the three line energy. And you're a 6-3 profile in human design. It's about experimenting, trying out, like, hey, I did it, didn't work. And I think our own experience is always the most valuable. That's why, I mean, storytelling is just so
Oh yeah.
powerful, right?
That's by the way, real quick, the gene keys.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard so much about it for some time. I looked up briefly about a year or two ago, and this conversation just came up yesterday from
Mm-hmm.
an Ayurvedic naturopathic doctor friend of mine who she had done it for her husband and her family. She's like, you got to go into gene keys, do gene, like sent me all the information, like literally. So it's just so funny that you bring this up. It's like, of course,
Yeah, universe is talking to you. It's funny,
course,
no? When
right?
we're
Yeah.
supposed to, it's
Yeah, like literally I have it like pulled up on my screen over here. So I was like, of course, you
well,
know. But
mm.
sorry, I digressed. What were we what were we?
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. No, I think this is beautiful to showcase also synchronicities, right?
Yeah.
Instead of like figuring out what is my next step, right now life is telling you, hey, there's something with the gene keys that's gonna unlock the next level for you or something like that, right? Because you hear it from different places that are totally unrelated.
Yeah, you know, well, you know, and I know because we were talking about experimenting and you know, it's interesting to learn. So, you know, I'm sure your audience knows probably quite a bit from you about human design and gene keys, but why I found it so fascinating was just because it is a unique blueprint to the individual.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like at a spiritual DNA level and understanding your gifts and understanding like how energetically you want to move.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a break from the system that uh, even in our own individual journeys, by the way, like I don't want to ever paint the picture that it's like the easiest thing to go out on your own and to do all these things because like you are combating still a lot of like societal norms that
Mm-hmm.
definitely look at you like you're crazy, you know? Like, what do you mean you just trusted? You know, what do you mean
Exactly.
you just that? And it was interesting learning as a projector, it made so much sense why there were a lot of times I actually, I was a consultant. So like one, I'm being invited because projectors have to be invited for their advice, but that
Mm-hmm.
does not mean they want to hear it. And then on top of that,
Mm-hmm.
it comes naturally. How do you explain to a world, especially sometimes people who maybe you're trying to help, who have
Mm-hmm.
all these backgrounds, right, in all this learning and training, and I was able to solve like a certain problem for them without that background and training.
Yeah.
And oof, like as a project, like they were not. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know anything about my human design. I was
Mm-hmm.
sort of like naive in business in the sense that I just like to naturally collaborate and solve problems
Mm-hmm.
and create.
Yeah.
But when I started having to deal with different egos in the corporate world, it was a very fascinating thing to watch because they're like, well, how do you know that? I'm like, well, I mean, don't you like the result though? And they're like, yeah, but who got you? Who did the work for you? I'm like, well, first of all, I'm a consultant, so I'm not even an employee of yours, you know. So chill, you know, you know. But that wasn't. It threw me off because I'm like, what? Like, you know, and I would even almost get defensive myself. Like, what are you talking about? Like, no, like this is that. Like, it's like you're struggling to kind of fit yourself into a box to
Mm-hmm.
explain it like, and without quote unquote their background. So they're kind of like in a daze of, well, how do you know this stuff? And it's
Yeah,
like, well, I
yeah.
mean, back to the experimentation, or like, well, I mean, I because I did it. It's like instead of just going to school and learning it, I actually integrated it. And if you want, I can tell this quick story of this. I was at a, Eventbrite, the platform for events.
Yeah, for events, yeah.
They had an event in LA, for creators, and there was a woman there, who was talking about ikigai,
Mm-hmm.
and
I'm
and
familiar.
right, and your natural creativity. And I've told the story only a couple of times, but it's such a profound story. She was Iranian American. Her family came from the Middle East when I think she was like 4 years old to the US. And her father passed away like when she was like 8 or 10 years old, and it hit her very hard because she was very close with her
Mm-hmm.
father, and it changed the family dynamic a little bit. But she's at the same time growing up in the 90s and high school. She's now like 42. She grew up in the 90s in high school, and so like a lot of the changing culture between music and pop culture and things like that. And she's having a home life that's very Middle Eastern, and a school life that's
Mm-hmm.
very like American pop culture, growing, all this stuff. Anyway, she does great with her grades, goes to college and does great with her grades, and she's choosing to go to law school. Because she's thinking, well, I kind of I like the idea of justice,
Mm-hmm.
and something is happening to her internally that she is having a massive struggle with it. And she gets all of these letters of acceptance, and she's looking at the bill, and it's like $250,000 to become a lawyer.
No joke.
And she had to ask herself that question right there, like, do I want to be paying this off the rest of my life? And she really, something just clicked, and she decided to forgo law school, all of it. And she only had a few $1,000s saved. She forgo law school, but she ended up, I guess, in a year-long state of depression, because it's
Mm-hmm.
like, from an identity standpoint, this is kind of to tie it all together. It's like, from an identity standpoint, like if I don't have this direction and this thing that like would have made my family proud, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a quote unquote, noble path, it pays well, or used to, like all these things, like, you know, um, and it was hard to let that go. So her whole thing was like, well, who is she then without a direction? Which I get,
Mm-hmm.
because when we remove ourselves from society's kind of structure,
Yeah.
it's very easy to feel like very just out there hanging by a thread, unsure. And we can, I think, sometimes, that depression is real, but it's not, it's temporary. And I
Yeah.
want people to also know that, like, look, it's only temporary because you're separating from doing what everybody would have normally done. And so what ended up happening, her story is like phenomenal. Talk about all, and she talked a little, I think she mentioned human design a little bit in there, but she meets a woman in New York who's like healing and energy. And um, she recognizes in her what nobody else has been able to tell her. She's like, you're upset because none of that stuff is your path. You're a designer. And she's
Mm-hmm.
like, she never talked about it publicly. She's like,
Mm-hmm.
go on. And so she felt seen for her energy of what was happening internally from an intuitive level. She's like, you're a designer. You're meant to design things. And she's like, but I don't have any education. And she's like, doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah.
it's within you. It's your energy profile. It's in like all this stuff. And she was like, and it lit her up the possibilities, because for the first time somebody said something other than like what psychologists and other people and therapists and stuff like that. This one was telling her something more from an energy profile, like from an internal thing. So fast forward, she decides, okay, she's going to go to fashion design school in LA, where she was living. And she looked at the curriculum, and she's like, I don't want to be taught any of this stuff. I already know this intuitively. And so
Yeah.
she's having the second battle of like having to trust herself. She's like, I don't want to like learn theory of this and theory of that and theory of this. Like, she's like, this makes no sense. And then so she's battling this idea of like, well, oh, maybe it's not to take a traditional route. And then she
Mm-hmm.
thought, I just need to learn the tooling, the machinery to make something. So now she can integrate, and this again to tie this back to the beginning of the conversation of, she had to make a move knowing she wanted to create something.
Mm.
In this case, she thought, I want to make a shoe. And so she goes to China to learn in the factories, like just how the tooling works
Yeah.
to make something to come back and continue making it back in the States. She makes it and she decides to sell it online and or at least post it online. And the general public online was going crazy. And this is back in like early Facebook days, like late MySpace, early Facebook days. And the general public's going crazy. So she takes her shoe and she goes to, so again, going back into the society path, takes
Mm.
it to buyers, takes it to retailers. Nobody wants it. That's not going to work. I won't have that shoe in my store. No, like, no, all the gatekeepers, right? The people not making something, but deciding on what the world wants. That's
Mm.
fascinating,
Yeah.
right? Again, like, it's so she thought, okay, I'm going to just keep creating, but like online, they keep asking for the shoe. So she's now like developing this heel. It's selling out. She's running this business from her home with her family. And to fast forward again, she has this friend who's like this big like written poetry artist in New York who's like related to everybody, the who's who in music. And she has this dream about him, about like this kind of character in this play that he would write, and like she can see all the costume stuff, and she's with him like a few days later, and they're talking, and he has this idea of like something that he wants to do, and she's like, you know, I wasn't going to tell you this. She's like, but I had this dream, and she's describing everything to a T. He goes in the back and pulls out his concepts, and it was exactly what she designed in her mind. And he's
Wow.
like, perfect, I need you to design this jewelry piece for me. And she's like, I'm not a jewelry designer. And he goes, you're a designer, aren't you? And so again, it comes up. And she's like, yeah, but I did a shoe. And he's like, no, but you have an eye, you design. So
Mm.
design this ring for me, design this jewelry for me. So she designs this ring, this piece of jewelry, whatever. And it like was such a hit that Erica Badu, the famous R&B artist, like calls her out of the blue, who's like who knew the this
Mm.
poet guy,
Mm.
calls her out of the blue, and she thought it was a prank call that she hung up on her, and the woman calls back, the artist, you know, Erica calls back, and she's like, hey, it's Badu, like, you know, I'm Erica Badu, and she's like, I saw what you did for so and so, I want you to make the same thing for me, but like individual for like for me for my album cover. The album went
Mm.
on to go win Grammys, and the artwork ended up in the Smithsonian Museum. So she created something that won a
Mm.
that was part of something that a person, an artist who won a Grammy, and then that artwork ended up in the Smithsonian. So you don't know how far your work is going to go. You just don't.
Mm.
And then that led to Adidas called her, and they wanted to do a shoe. And then what happened was like a
Yeah.
sneaker collab. She does a
Mm.
sneaker collab on the wings. Michael Jordan and Nike are watching this. She doesn't even know. She doesn't know she's being watched. They wait until the non-compete is done. Then they approach her and say, hey, we want you to do a Jordan shoe collab. So imagine she's doing all these things, and then
Yeah.
eventually she goes on to design tour merchandise and marries Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and like just had her first child at 42. And it's like this whole now it was
Nice.
either the lawyer path, the societal path, or
Uh,
I have to break from that and having an identity based on a role and what society says I should do, but I have the responsibility to understand what I'm feeling inside and grow it and nurture it and manage it and build it and earn from it and do all these things. So it's still work. It's more work than ever, but it's the work that we're here to do for ourselves versus the
yeah.
work for something we're not passionate about or not like connected to. So
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that you shared the story. Thank you for that. I have so much to say now because this is really what this is all about. And I want to kind of pick up a couple of wisdom nuggets from this. It's like,
yeah,
I think sometimes people are like, oh, yeah, they were lucky, no? We can easily have this saying. But what I have realized is that, so the old way with the business school, I got my equivalent also to MBA, like a diploma in German was at the time,
mm-hmm.
masters in business and stuff. And it's just piling information onto you, right?
Yeah,
Piling, piling, piling. disconnects you actually more and more from your intuition. No? It's a very like, and the funny thing is that I have realized that what we know from a quantum physics level is 1 divided by 2 million% or something like that. It's like nothing. And what we don't know, the quantum field also Einstein tapped into, and all the, the great people out there we know that created new inventions, that comes from this, like when you connect to your inner knowing and you have the courage to create something completely new, because it's like the 99.999% of the unknown. That's where all the magic is. And our job is not to pile on more information. I don't want to say that school and business schools and all of this is redundant, but I want to question it to some
Yeah.
level. And our job is to unbecome and let go of what we are not. It's I love tapping. You probably know EFT
Yeah.
tapping. There's a guy,
Oh, yeah.
Brad Yates, he talks about this, how he approaches like Michelangelo when he was making his sculptures, because that's how tapping is, to release, let go of what's not serving so you can connect to yourself and carry out the responsibility of sharing your gifts with the world, getting out of your way with self-doubt and everything. And it's like Michelangelo saw the sculpture in the big square thing and he just chiseled away
Mm-hmm.
what was not supposed to be there, and then the angel, the beautiful sculpture, came about.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I feel like everything in society is so backwards. And I think for you and I, that's what I was saying earlier. Somehow, for me, it's common sense. It's like, but I have to remind myself that for the majority of people, that's not the normal way of thinking. And I think that's why these conversations we have, the books we write, and all of this are so profound, because I have several friends that I went to school with. The ones that are darn successful are the ones that, well, I just followed my intuition. I did what I loved, and and I never questioned anything else. And it's also, I think, so talking about the lady you talked about, if she would have done the law
Lawyer.
school, what she has to do, she may have become financially successful on the paper, but probably burned out, not feeling well, huge midlife crisis, getting
Mm-hmm.
kicked in the butt, where it's like heart.
Right.
Like you have the financial success, but internally it's declining and declining and declining. And life will put more and more obstacles in the way until you wake up. And when we have the courage to follow the dream, which everybody tells you it's ridiculous, it's crazy, don't do it, right? That's when the magic happened. That's when because life is like, I always imagine it literally this way. When you really step into your calling, it's like getting excited and throws all these synchronicities in your way, because it's already laid out, the web, but we have to see it. We see it through our heart, through our intuition, right? It's so easy and simple, actually,
Yeah.
yet
Yeah.
it's the hardest for us because we're
Simplicity is.
so in the head. Yeah.
Simplicity is, it can be very hard.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a, yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking about, I was having this conversation with a friend, and I think we were referencing, what was it? Uh, Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray,
Mm,
Love, and she was talking about, how this concept of, it's funny when you want to go after the thing that you're passionate about,
mm.
or that's artistic, or that is not your normal route. It's interesting that the people go, oh, it's a very saturated market. Oh,
It's amazing.
not many people are going to make it. Not many people make it usually in that thing. Oh, do you know what you're up against? It's all these things, right? And the joke was, but how come they don't do that for, like, oh, you want to become a lawyer? Oh, it's a saturated market. Oh, you want to become an engineer? Oh, it's a very tough market. You want to become a doctor? Instead it's like, good for you. Good, good, that's going to be great. That's going to,
Mm,
it's like interesting. So somebody says that they want to do something that resonates with their soul, that's different than the norm, and it's like, oh, and you're met with so much resistance of the general public. Now,
mm,
my theory, of course, on that is just that you're making the general public nervous, because you're breaking the game, you're breaking the system that they're playing, and it
Mhm.
forces them to have to basically, like, they're feeling something internally, they're actually projecting their own fears on you. And
Yeah.
that's why I tell a lot of people, like, following your own path. The only reason why I mean, now there's more of us than ever, and then now there's online communities for this, but
Mhm.
like, but yeah, there's a lot of the resistance that you're feeling from the public has nothing to do with you. It has to do with their choices, and they haven't yet made those choices, whether they know that they're available or not. And so you're breaking the mold of the choices that they made. And if they have to look at their own choices, well, they're going to have to question a lot of their decisions up until that point. And what do we know about self-development and healing and that whole journey, personal
Mhm.
development and letting go and all of these things? Like, it it is not easy until it is, but those
Yeah.
first few years can be very,
Can be scary.
very scary. And so that's one thing that's happening on that side. But everything you were saying, I completely agree. It's so interesting that because of the way typically that those things were viewed. And
Mhm.
but yeah, when you are in your thing, when you integrate passion and um perseverance, those two. Because I think what also
Mhm.
happens is that I have to, not to say sides, but that side of things, the general societal way, oh, your passion, you're going to be like a broke artist. And you're like, no, first of all, I'm going to work twice and three times as hard as you. And I want anybody that's listening to know that, like,
Mhm.
going after something you love, you're going to work harder, but it's not the same work. And I did a whole
No.
podcast episode on this. It's very important to know this. Hard work for something you love and hard work for something you're not connected to are two very different types of work.
Yeah.
And most people are worried that if they associate, like, well, I didn't like this work and it was a lot of hard work, so I can only imagine doing hard work for something I love, like, and they almost sabotage themselves before they ever do the thing that they love, because it's like they knew what they were doing for something, the hard work for something that they weren't connected to. And
Mhm.
that was like, it's like being in the wrong relationship, right? And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're afraid to get into a good relationship. It's like that. And it's like, no, when you're aligned in the right relationship or you're aligned in the right work, you will wake up so much different doing the work. It's a different kind of work. It lights you up. In fact,
Mhm.
in some ways, you wish you could go faster. Like, I struggle with that sometimes, especially
Yeah.
when
You want to
my
do all
pro
the things, right?
yeah, and my
Mhm.
profile won't even allow me technically, energetically to go faster, even though I have all my Manny Gen friends and generators that are like,
Mhm.
manifesting generators and generator friends that are like you're doing a lot of output, and I was like, well,
Mhm.
I have to use systems just to stay up with you guys. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, so I think that's a really, because we get told from that side a lot about, oh, passion, you think you're gonna make money from your passion, like, yeah. And to wrap up this point, I will just say, like, the funny thing for me is I ask people all the time, like, do you like your iPhone? They're like, I love it. I'm like, do you like that a piece of apparel you're wearing? They're like, I love it. Do you like that purse? Do you like your wallet? Do you like, all these things? Like, I love it. I'm like, you're consuming things from all the people who didn't go your route. And then you have the audacity to tell people who are going their
Exactly.
own route that it's going to be tough. You're not going to make it. You're not going to this.
Mhm.
And, you consume all the products on the planet from people who went, and to your exact point earlier about, like, building their own thing and being innovative and creating something and, on their,
Mhm.
like, different. It's
Yeah.
like, well, you're all consuming it.
Yeah, it is really so. I
Right?
have to agree. And it's also, I think we humans, we're so wired to, we want to have certainty, right? And I
Yes.
think these systems, old school systems, they create an illusion of certainty,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
And it's like, it's not like people mean bad, but it's so ingrained in us, and this like causal way of thinking. If I do this, I'm gonna make money, I'm gonna be fine, I'm gonna have my house, I'm gonna survive, right? It's really, I think, where this is coming from. And this whole entrepreneurial follow your passion kind of thing that we have luckily had the courage to step into, it is really scary. But, and like you say also, like, it takes you so much out of your comfort zone and into the unknown. It's, I have to admit, so today, like, I don't have the exact plan for the next 3 months. Like, there's always so much newness coming because I follow the breadcrumbs of the universe.
Hmm.
And but it also makes me feel so alive because
Mm.
I really don't thrive on boredom and always having the same thing over and over again, like sitting in the cubicle for the next 10 years of my life. I just not for the life of it. I rather build my own wooden house in the Wild West or something because this is like also freedom for me, right? The flexibility to follow my passions and yeah, we work hard, but in a way that actually doesn't feel like work often, right?
Right. And there's it's interesting. There's a little bit of mastery in there. First of all, I love that you bring up the illusion of certainty. I literally have a post coming out shortly on that. It's so true.
Cool.
But so synchronicity again. And but uh I shouldn't have cut myself off. So it was just like what were we just right before that, right before
I was talking that's when you go with
oh, the
your heart.
breadcrumbs.
The
Yes.
breadcrumbs,
The
yes.
breadcrumbs. I will, there's this, it's like you're surrendering to quote unquote uncertainty to like how things are gonna, be revealed to you. And at the same
Mm,
time, not to completely decimate, the structured other side. I do
mm,
like what I found is from discipline, and we started talking about that before the podcast. From discipline, it allows me discipline and an innate curiosity for how far I can take the things that I'm here to do.
mm,
So it does put me into a category of I do have to reflect on it. I do have to create a schedule weekly for myself. I'm not out here completely free floating. Like the free floating for me is doing the unknown and allowing new information to come in and
mm-hmm,
then taking that information and be like, now that I know, how do I
mm-hmm.
use that to work on my craft better out of the responsibility of like, of wanting to be better at this thing or set of
Yeah,
things. And so there's definitely a surrender and a lean in at the same time. Like you're
yeah.
constantly doing this, like, I'm gonna go for it and I'm gonna remove
Mm-hmm,
my
mm-hmm.
ego where I can. So the humility allows me to let
Yeah,
it go.
exactly. And I cannot wait actually for you to dive into the Jinkies, and I'm sure you're gonna bring it somehow into your work because there are two Jinkies, the first and the second Jinky. The first is the most masculine, taking action, doing the thing, the systems, the structures. The second Jinky is all about the feminine, the surrender. And what we have backwards is that we have put the masculine always first,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Like, but when you take the time to slow down, to surrender, what is even my path? What is even my guidance?
Right.
You slow down and then you shift in the right direction. And then, like you said, you get the divine guidance. And then, okay, I have my schedule now, my structure, but within that, I can still flow. And if new intuitive guidance, I can shift and pivot, right? So yeah, it's so beautiful. And even the simplicity you brought up, there's a Jinky 23. If you look it up, that's all about simplicity. I think you're gonna have a blast with all of that. And now I do wanna I also keep looking at the picture because I realize there's like dollar signs in the back. I love money too and
Oh
talking
yeah.
about money. This is so cool in the arts too. I don't know why, but I felt like
I can
pointing it out.
I can explain that one, but
Yeah, if you want that, and then I also would love for you to talk about the apparel that you're working
yeah,
on.
yeah, and just to really um I love the what you brought up about, and I'm looking forward to learning that in the Gene Keys, the masculine, the feminine, because intuition is a very feminine. I was lucky to be around very strong, intuitive, wise women growing up,
Mm,
or friends, or I was once married, but then also like in women that I dated for marriage, hopefully hoping for marriage. Very strong, very wise, very intuitive. And
mm,
what's so interesting is I find that I mean, you want the integration of the two energies because there are times for being very systematic and forward driving and protective, and then there are times for like, wait, let me come back into the heart, or let me like
mm,
feel into like what am I missing. And I found that like when you use your intuition, like it like quadruples your business, everything, your acumen, your profitability, so there's this like dynamic of like you do need both. And
Mm.
it's such a beautiful harmony. That's why when you see like people compete solely on the masculine, you're like, whoa, 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 like whether it's men and women competing only on the masculine traits,
Mm.
or you know what I mean? Or you see like this kind of like, look, the fact is every person has both energies, and you just need to understand like where do you lead and lean forward, and where do you reflect
Mm.
and be intuitive and use that like that internal guidance system, that knowing that, so I love that. The painting behind me that you're referencing, that if anybody's, they're listening or whether they're watching, they could see it, is it's actually it was a bigger painting that um one of my closest friends like stenciled at the top of this painting before it was
Mm.
made, because I was talking about from a business standpoint. um it was a time where I was still not really learning about how we know what we know. And you know how people always come to you, it's like, oh, let me pick your brain, let me pick your brain, let me pick your brain. And like sometimes it's okay if it's like for 5-10 minutes, but sometimes people like they keep coming to you, they want like hours of your time, and like they may never even execute. And they also are kind of like, you're like, I can coach you, like, or I can, I've got services, and like, oh, no, no, I'm good. And so for anybody that's listening, it was like the expression that I had heard online somewhere was, um, it just says, until a deposit is dropped, we're just hypothetically speaking. so, so as a consultant and a coach yourself, like
Yeah.
the feeling of like, and so the painting is this mixed medium painting. I had seen this one artist, God rest her soul, she passed away a few years ago. She did a cool mixed medium painting, and she had like used all of she did like a step of dollar bills up,
Mm.
just from mixed medium. But what I got was, until a deposit is dropped. So until like it's like, put into like deposited like down, and then it just stacks up. And so like I put this in the
Mm.
dollars in this painting. And but yeah, everybody was asked about the painting, and I made it. It was just something that, a friend of
Oh,
mine and I worked on,
cool.
and yeah, two of us worked on it, and that's what came out. And um the apparel. So interestingly enough, and I was talking about this with my mother a few months back. Um, I never really talked about it with my father before he passed away 5 years ago. He was like a mentor and best friend. And
Mm.
but like my mother remembers this side of me, where she was like, when as a child, you were always designing, you were always like drawing, and you were drawing like certain things with clothing, and like, you were always like really into the arts and designing. And she's like, so it's interesting to watch a full circle moment. She was saying it from as a mother, but she's like, it's interesting to watch as a full circle moment, something there that she's like, you don't even like, I don't even have to know how it starts, I just know
Mm-hmm.
that it's starting, and where will that go? Like, I already know it'll be fine because there's something there. So back to your original point, it's like there's something there. I knew I
Mm.
wanted to do something with it, um, um, and I didn't know when. And then I got to a point where I wanted to do this kind of, it's my own mixed medium version, in a way where I knew I wanted to bring my writing into a new medium other than a traditional one.
Mm.
And for me, I thought, wouldn't it be cool to bring it into apparel? And because now we're not only wearing something with the energy as a reminder for our unique talents and gifts and path, but we're reminding others. And
Yeah, so true.
I like that ripple effect. Like, it's not even about me. And
Mm.
each individual wears it, it's about them. And then when they're out there wearing these pieces, others are seeing it as well, as a means of like, okay, like so we're all walking around reminding each other. And so it's really just the start of it. I had to, back to the whole like, it's never perfect, just publish it. I mean, I definitely put a good foot forward. It took me about 7 months. I made this site, the Shopify site. I like was working with the manufacturer.
Mm.
In this day and age, it's not as, I don't want people to feel like it's not as difficult as it once was, but it does take some
Mm-hmm.
time, clearly.
Yeah,
Um,
obviously. Yeah, yeah.
and so but with today's technology, you can easily make your site, and you can actually, today it's better than ever. Like, so you can do your print on demand, folks. You can learn other manufacturers that they'll print on demand and do your fulfillment, and like, but you can integrate their technology into your Shopify store. And and you can have like relationships, like I'm going out to Vegas and then to LA to meet some of these different manufacturers that their technology will pair up with my site. So people can be like, oh, I want this. And then they'll print then. And
Oh, cool.
they'll always keep like an inventory number of like, hey, there's still some of this material available. And if it's not, then it'll,
Mm,
then I'm sold out. Right.
I love
So
it.
yeah, but that was the base of the apparel, is that I wanted a starting point. And I'm, and that game has changed. Apparel is very different now. People are consciously consuming very differently. They want to have a relationship with the person creating it. They want to, relate to whatever it is that you are creating as well. They want to
Mm,
almost somewhat feel like they're involved in some way. And it's not about and this also kind of comes back to the whole human design thing. Like you don't have to make some 50, $100 million a year business. And some people like sometimes I'm like, no, 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 back to that whole societal thing. Like, what if your business made 2, 3 million or a million or half a million, but like your costs are like almost
mm,
zilch. Like you're
yep.
actually living off like we were raised in a society that said like make $1 billion company. I'm like, but have not a lot of people understand that means that you probably have hundreds or thousands of employees. You
Mm,
have operating costs that are extremely
mm.
high. But it was an old paradigm.
Yeah, I mean, they talk about revenue, but what about the profit, right?
They don't
And
understand.
the work
Yeah.
that goes into it. Yeah.
They don't know the P&L. They don't know the
Mm,
operating costs. They don't know how to take care of the employees and all of their benefits and all their,
mm,
it's a different world now. And you are watching a lot of online creators that are proving a different model because they're saying, hey, like your overhead can be much lower, like
mm,
extremely lower, like
mm,
10% operating margins, and you're taking home 80 to 90% of your money before, however you have to report that. But
mm.
and so that too is a shift in thinking that it's getting creators to be like, wait a minute, you're right. Like I can only make X dollars a year and live very well off of that and do only things that I love without like hustle, 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 like build it
Mm.
bigger, build it bigger, build it bigger. It's like, no, 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 like why? I mean, I get wanting impact, but are you building it bigger solely for proving yourself to be like, look at what I built,
Yeah.
look at how big it is, and it's like then you've already lost because
Mm,
I've watched a few people who some that I'd known where they sold for like 100 million, made 50, 60 million. I won't use a name, just thinking of one guy in particular, great guy, burned out. He disappeared off of Instagram for 2 years, got the money, bought the crazy home, did all this
mm,
stuff.
mm,
Loneliest time of his life, ended up in a huge bout of depression, ended up traveling the world to kind of find himself again and
mm,
reconnect with his
mm.
soul and everything he thought he wanted,
Yeah, that's
because
also the illusion of money. There's even a
yeah,
book. I don't know if you know the book by Kyle Cease, but yeah, it's I think there's tons of stories out there about
right?
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's also I think when I think about businesses, it's always about more, 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 more. Like,
right,
can we breathe for a moment? Like maybe it's actually
right,
good to have it steady or go a little bit down and it's okay. Like
right,
nature has its up and downs and day and night, and waves don't just keep going up, they go up and down and up and down, and some waves are bigger, some are smaller. Like it's always, yeah, proving ourselves, and it's really like, yeah, sometimes less is more, but maybe then
a
you
lot.
enjoy it.
A lot and less is more, and I love that it's now being adapted and taught by a lot of like people who've
Mm,
done it. Like you've got the Dan Martells of the world. You've
right,
got the
exactly.
Naval Ravikant talking about less is more. Greg McKeown in Essentialism. um Gary Keller from Keller Williams Real Estate, and he wrote the book The One Thing, Less is More. Like these concepts of less is more. And I think what sometimes people don't realize, it's like if you narrow your focus and only on the things that matter, and you
Mm,
treat it really well with efficiency, with details, with love and intuition and all these things, you will actually maximize your return
yeah.
and get even more from less than just this idea of the rat race, corporate structure of like more, 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 more for the sake of more. And it's like,
Mm,
no, like what if you just cut out the waste and only do the things that really truly matter, and you have a life and you are healthy and you make good money? Like What a concept.
Yeah.
And again, that wasn't taught in school. It wasn't a concept we were being raised with, you know, I mean, in terms of society. So the shift that's happening now, and by the way, that's very disruptive to the old paradigm thinking. Like they fight that sometimes because they're like,
Mm.
no, it couldn't possibly be that way. Like, and I get it. Their trauma that they're holding inside of having to fight and hustle a certain way that was really
Mm.
ingrained generationally, they're not happy about it. Like, how dare you
Yeah.
say that it could be easier? I'm like, well, I didn't say, I was like, I said it's simple, not easy. Like, you still
Mm.
have to
Yeah, I
work,
use easy all the time.
right?
I might
Right?
trigger a lot of people.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, of course, because it's conditioning, and what we're used to is survivable, and our nervous system freaks out when something new is coming. Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
But thank you for sharing all of this. I think we could probably talk for a couple more hours, but I want to be graceful with the time for all of us. I wanted to say I would love to see also some ladies shirts and stuff for
Yes.
the apparel line if I can put a request. I love
Absolutely.
also organic cotton things, and
Yes.
so yeah,
Hmm.
but I love your messages, so I would love to wear some of these. Absolutely.
100%. So this one, organic cotton. So I'm there with
Oh,
you for
cool.
sure.
You're already
Yep.
there. I love it.
And but yes, to your exact point, I've got some of the like the unisex t-shirts launching, but
Mm.
yes, a few have requests from the women have said, hey, some women's shirts. I'm like, I got it, I get it.
Cool. Yeah, because I think
Absolutely.
when I first saw it, I clicked on it and I was like, is he gonna make some lady? Was the first thing I was
Yes.
like, I need to ask him. So
a hundred
yeah,
percent. Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
So here's your market research, you see?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And honestly, again, now that's a good thing to hear
Yeah.
repeatedly. And especially since when I looked at the numbers, and I think it was
Mm.
like 75% of my of the purchases of the hundred and some purchases over on the first like month and a half were women.
Yeah, here you
So
go.
but
Yeah.
but the statistics have always shown that even before I did that,
Mm.
women are so loyal online and they're so risk taking. Like if they see a brand that they can identify with and they like it,
Mm.
they'll try it. Whereas men, you know, and these statistics have been this way since like 2010. Women
Mm-hmm.
dominate the internet because they'll take a chance on things faster than men. And
Mm.
you could even have a bad experience. They'd be like, I'll give you another chance.
I
Whereas like
see. We're so nice.
we analyze everything. We're like, well, let me see if I can find this here. Where else can I find it?
Mm.
You know, let me go to the store. Let me try it on. You know, women are so graceful and loyal online. You know, I mean, you dominate markets, but thank you. I appreciate the feedback. It's
That's nice.
I'm working on it for sure.
Then thank you for responding. I love it. Also, Matt, I have one final question. And of course, I'm gonna put everything in the show notes, your podcast, how to get in contact with you, your Instagram, your website. What's one final nugget of wisdom that you want to leave the listeners with that has been life-changing for you?
Probably along the lines of what you've been seeing me post a lot lately, like just publish it, just
Mm.
promote it, just publish it and just promote it. And I'll say this, like, um, keep putting your work out there to allow it to become what it's supposed to,
Mm.
and keep promoting it because um, one of the things that I think people miss, and I heard this independent music artist say this about, I think it was last year, and he said, some of you guys, you post once or twice about something that you just made, and then you never post it again. And he said,
Mm.
I've been posting my album every day for a year. And I think he made like close to $1 million. He's like, I've been posting something about my album every day for the last year. And he was giving that advice. And what I loved about that is like something to think about if you want me to help rationalize why it's a good thing. When you post something, not everybody sees it that day of your audience. Not everybody does.
Yeah,
Your
I
loyal audience,
know.
not everybody sees it that day. They could have been busy. Then the next day, the people who didn't see it, they get to see it. And the people who did see it, maybe they're like, oh, thanks for the reminder. Let me go check it
Mm.
out. And then the next day and the next day and the next day. Now, another thing to think about is that you're always growing, so more people are always finding out about you. So new people are always coming into the world, so they need to see what you've got going on with your work.
Mm.
And other people who didn't get to, who've been following you or part of your, you know, journey that didn't see it, they
Yeah.
want to know about it. And then people who did want to be reminded about it. So you're never going to lose promoting something that you love every single day, that's pride in your work or being proud of your work. And then, sharing it with the world so the people who are looking for you can find you. So I would definitely
Yeah,
say like
thank you.
promote,
I
promote,
have been
promote
so guilty of it in the beginning because
everybody.
there was always this fear of being too much or being
I know. I know.
obnoxious. I guess it's fear of rejection. And I had to hear it also so many times. So thank you for reiterating that because especially on social media, right? That you get a split second, people forgot about it and don't even remember they saw it. Yeah. So,
I know.
so true. Yeah, thank you for the reminder. And is there anything else you want to like how for people to work with you, how to get in contact with you? Anything else you would like to share?
Yeah, if you go to mattgottesman.com or on Instagram, Matt Gottesman, like the links in the
Mm-hmm.
bio will also, take everybody to everywhere. mattgottesman.substack.com is where I do the writing. I'm actually going to start really ramp up the writing again. I took a little small sabbatical on that. And the nichesyou.com for the apparel. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, if they want to work, a lot of times I have a private session booking link through the
Mm-hmm.
through mattgosman.com or on Instagram. And yeah, it's been great. Actually, I've got a few creators that are like, can I just like do like the beginning of each month a call with you? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, that's it. You're like, I'm good with that. I'm like, yeah, I'm good with that. Like, but
Awesome.
it's helping them, dial it in, make a move, dial it in, make a
Mm.
move. And like I like helping creatives or entrepreneurs or artists like really, anybody that wants to build anything. I like
Yeah,
that. So
I
yeah.
love it. I love it. Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I can't wait for your book to come out.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you want to say about that or just surprise?
Surprise. No, I mean it's very heavily related to a lot of the like a lot of what we were talking about from the
Yeah.
the spiritual aspect of like all these things that are happening internally for us to help us kind of trust
Mm-hmm.
ourselves more. I am self-publishing this first one.
Nice.
I get permission from others to whether or not the book should go out. I want to do it for the audience, and
Mm.
yeah. So I hopefully will have it done by this year. That was the goal. It is the goal. So, and then I'm writing it in a way where at the end of chapters, it's very kind of similar to Rick Rubin's The Creative Act, and at the end of certain chapters, there are like journal prompts, like just questions that'll help you ground further into the concepts of that particular like
That's
mini chapter.
powerful.
So I'm
Yeah.
making an adjacent journal to it where the journal will have one question a day for 365 days. So it allows you to like
Wow,
actually,
powerful.
actually like have a place to journal it separate if you need to. Like, let me
Mm.
actually journal this. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's more than that because so often we read a book, we put it on the shelf, we don't do anything with it, but this actually makes you apply it. I love it.
yeah,
Yeah, can't wait for it to come out. Thank you so much. This was super fun, super inspiring. Thank you for sharing all your
yeah.
beautiful wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me. Truly, I so appreciate it, and thank you to your audience for listening. So
Yeah, my pleasure. And you listeners, thank you for tuning in. I'm sure you love this episode. And I'm very excited to be with you all on the next one.